The wedding hall glittered like a scene stolen from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers dripped golden light across white roses and velvet drapes. Every chair was adorned with silk ribbons, every detail so carefully chosen that it felt less like a wedding and more like a scene from a magazine. Guests dressed in gowns and tuxedos whispered among themselves, waiting for the moment when the wealthy, untouchable millionaire, Edward Larkson, would wed the most sought-after woman in the city, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her ambition, Vanessa Grant. Everyone thought it was the perfect match, power marrying beauty, money marrying influence, a union destined to dominate headlines and social circles alike. Everyone thought it was perfect until a trembling voice shattered the silence. Wait. It was quiet, fragile, almost drowned out by the hum of violins, but it was enough. Heads turned, murmurs rippled. At the edge of the aisle, clutching a mop she had forgotten to put away, stood a woman no one ever noticed, the cleaner. Her name was Marable. Thin, tired, with calloused hands and hair that rarely had time to shine, she blended into the background of this glittering world. The kind of woman people passed by without a second glance. She had cleaned floors, polished silver, and straightened chairs for this wedding, but she had never dreamed of standing before the groom himself. And yet here she was, her eyes wet, her voice breaking as she spoke. "I can't stay quiet anymore." The guests gasped. Vanessa's face hardened, the smile she had been practicing for weeks freezing into something sharp and venomous. Edward blinked in disbelief, his steady, polished composure faltering as he stared at the trembling figure at the back of the hall. The priest hesitated, looking from the bride to the groom to the intruder. Does someone wish to speak?" Vanessa hissed under her breath. "Security, get her out of here." But Edward raised his hand. "Wait." His voice was commanding, the kind of voice that made people listen. The hall went silent. Marable swallowed hard. The weight of hundreds of eyes pressed against her chest. She was just a cleaner, a poor woman who should have known her place. Yet the truth inside her heart burned too strongly to bury. "I know this isn't my world," she whispered, her hands trembling around the mop handle. "And I know people like me don't belong in places like this. But Mr. Larkson, you deserve to know the truth before you say, 'I do.'" Vanessa's face paled. Edward frowned. "What truth?" Marable's voice cracked as she said it. "She doesn't love you, she never did. This whole wedding, it's not about you, it's about your money." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Guests erupted into whispers, some scandalized, some curious. Vanessa's nails dug into Edward's arm, her voice rising in rage. "This is ridiculous. She's lying. She's jealous, probably paid by one of your competitors to ruin this day. Edward, don't listen to her." But Edward's sharp eyes never left Marable. "How do you know this?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. She hadn't wanted to do this. She hadn't wanted to destroy a man's happiness, but she remembered the late nights when Vanessa thought no one was listening. The phone calls she overheard while scrubbing the marble floors. The laughter that wasn't loving but calculating. "I clean the offices where she makes her calls," Marable whispered. "I've heard her talking. She bragged about it. How she'd finally trap you. How she'd spend your money, enjoy the luxury, and keep her lover hidden." Gasps filled the room. Vanessa froze, her mouth open but no words came out. Edward's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, studying the woman he thought he knew. "Is this true?" Vanessa stammered. "Edward, she's a cleaner. You're really going to believe her over me? Look at her, look at me. Do you think someone like her has any right to stand here and destroy what we have?" But the way Vanessa's voice shook betrayed her. Edward turned back to Marable. "Why speak up now? You could have stayed silent." Marable lowered her gaze. "Because I couldn't bear to watch someone kind be hurt like this. You've always treated everyone with respect, even people like me. And I thought, if it were me, I'd want someone to warn me, even if it cost them everything." Edward's heart clenched. Her words cut deeper than Vanessa's denial. For years, he had built empires, signed contracts worth billions, and sat across tables from liars who smiled to his face. But in that moment, staring at a woman with nothing to gain and everything to lose, he realized who spoke the truth. He turned to Vanessa. "Is there another man?" The silence was louder than any answer. Her eyes flickered just for a second and Edward saw it, the lie unraveling. The crowd gasped as Edward let go of her hand. His voice was cold, steady. "This wedding is over." The room erupted. Some guests gasped in horror, others whispered eagerly, already imagining the headlines. Vanessa shrieked, her voice breaking with desperation. "You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am?" Edward didn't flinch. He walked down the aisle, past her, past the murmuring guests, until he stood before Marable. The cleaner wiped her tears, ashamed, expecting to be dragged away. But instead, Edward spoke softly. "Thank you." Those two words silenced her. No one had ever thanked her for anything beyond sweeping floors. She stared at him, trembling. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ruin everything." "You didn't ruin it," Edward said firmly. "You saved me." The days that followed were brutal. Headlines screamed about the canceled wedding, painting Edward as cold, Vanessa as a victim, and Marable as an insignificant nobody who had dared to interfere. She lost her job within hours. Vanessa made sure of that, spreading lies that Marable had been paid to sabotage the ceremony. But Edward didn't forget. 1 week later, he found her scrubbing the floors of a diner late at night, exhaustion written in every movement. He didn't come in wearing a suit or flanked by bodyguards. He came alone, quietly, and sat at the counter until she noticed him. Her heart dropped. "Mr. Larkson, I—" He shook his head. "Edward, please call me Edward." She stared unsure as he slid a small envelope across the counter. Inside was not money but an offer, a scholarship for her daughter's education, a letter of recommendation, and a job not as a cleaner but as an assistant in his foundation. Marable's lip trembled. Why would you do this?" "Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten," Edward said quietly. "That the greatest wealth a person can have isn't money or status, it's truth, and the courage to speak it." Tears filled her eyes. For so long she had been invisible, a woman whose worth was measured only by the stains she removed and the hours she worked. But in that moment she realized she mattered. Her voice mattered. Months passed. Vanessa faded from the spotlight, exposed for her schemes. Edward focused on his foundation, funding schools, shelters, and programs for those who had been silenced by poverty. And by his side, not as a cleaner but as someone he respected, was Marable. She still carried her humility, still worked harder than anyone else, but now she held her head higher. She was no longer invisible. And sometimes, when Edward looked at her, he wondered if fate had not ended a wedding that day, but had instead begun something far greater. Because sometimes the bravest voice in the room doesn't come from the powerful or the rich. It comes from the ones no one notices, the ones who carry truth in their hearts, even when it shakes their voice. And sometimes, that truth is enough to change everything.